and justice for all.
Call the meeting to order at 6:06. It is customary to start off with any opinions, concerns, questions from the audience. If you'd like to hold, you have agendas out there. The last item we're going to discuss is going to be the proposed budget for 0304. If you want to hold your questions to that point, you're welcome to do that. If you want to speak at the beginning, that's fine, but it's budget related. I'd like to ask you to hold it, and we can have during the questions, we'll start off with questions before, and then we can have dialogue during the discussion of the proposed budget also. Anyone like to address the board up front? If not, is there a motion to accept the treasurer's report for the multi-fund for March 2003 was in our board packet?
Move it. Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to accept the extra classroom activities account for the month of March 2003?
Move it.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Board acknowledges receipt of the personnel attendance report for March of 03. Is there a motion to recommend approving the Committee on Special Ed recommendations from their meetings held on April 8th, 9th, 10th, 24th, 25th, 30th, May 1st, 6th, and 7th?
So moved. Seconded.
Discussion?
Most of these meetings were annual reviews which have already been budgeted, so there's no change in monetary.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to recommend adopting the annual professional performance review forms and guidelines as presented in our board packet?
So moved.
Discussion?
Mr. Mulligan, would you like to say anything about the annual professional performance review?
The work on this took place over the course of about 2 years. Representing the Board of Education on the committee was Mr. Novacek and myself, Mr. Grandpree. We also had Mr. Peter Stone, Mr. Larry Fiola, and for 1 year, Mr. Louis Levesque were part of the committee that worked on the annual professional performance review. This is in coordination with New York State. It's all connected with the standards, and created, basically replaced our old system, which comprised of a formal and informal observation. We've added some. We now have what's called a long form, a short form. There is also a journal. That's a possibility that can be done at any time by a teacher. There's also a portfolio. These are all a result of suggestions by New York State, by State Ed, that have been complied with. The other thing that makes this a unique format, I believe, is a remediation plan that's built into the plan as well. And it was a collaborative effort, and many hours were spent getting it together, and we came up with something that we all feel comfortable with. It's been in place now this is the second year as a pilot program. We had quite a bit of success year one, very few changes. We addressed those changes, and we have to move forward. Anybody have any questions?
Just a comment that adoption of the annual professional performance review will make it the policy of the district, our evaluation of the professional staff.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to recommend approval of the 2002-2003 professional development plan as presented in our board packet?
Second.
Discussion?
Right back to Mr. Mulligan again.
This plan is, I believe this is the 4th year that we've submitted this for your acceptance. It basically states what our staff development plans are for the present year as well as for the near future. And it is something that has been mandated by the state of New York to have. We have an option of going 1 to 5 years with the plan. We have chosen to do it on a yearly basis, realizing that there are oftentimes many changes that are happening. And we did not want to find ourselves committed to a 5-year plan. I would like to thank 3 of our committee members on our staff development committee for largely being responsible for updating this professional development plan, and they would be Nancy Hughes, Tony Engelbrecht, and Linda Brubaker. They worked as a subcommittee to get this together. You can see that it covers a wide spectrum of staff development areas that we're looking at, including computer technology, special ed, and instructional strategies, amongst others. Anybody have any questions concerning it? Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to recommend approval of the new superintendent, Robert Hebert's contract for the term from July 5th, 2003 through June 30th, 2006?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to recommend appointment of the following teachers for Math A after-school instruction? Vicki Babby, Melissa Dudiak.
So moved.
Discussion?
Well, this is part of our after-school instruction program, and we have 2 teachers that are receptive to working with some of the students to help them better prepare for the Regents in June.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to request authorization to post 11-month typist position in the middle school guidance office?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Just that what we are doing actually is an internal posting for purpose of reassignment of staff.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to request authorization to post a custodian position at the middle senior high school?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
This is along the same lines. This is an internal posting for the purpose of reassigning staff.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to recommend accepting the letter of retirement received from Patricia Racine effective July 1st, 2003?
So
To
moved.
request authorization to post?
So moved. Second.
Discussion?
Well, we appreciate Mrs. Racine's dedicated service over many, many years. Wish her well in retirement. And I would add that this would be what I consider a full posting, in other words, it would go to Press Republican and so on, because we will need to hire a mathematics teacher for the fall.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to recommend approval of the 3 in-service credits be granted to Larry Paola for work in the grant writing process for the comprehensive school reform grant?
Move it. Second.
Discussion?
Just that we're gearing up to, as soon as the request for proposal is available, we're gearing up to work on a grant that could bring as much as $1 million in over a 3-year period, with the emphasis on school reform, school improvement, professional development, all in an effort to ensure that we are being as effective as we can. And the Paola will help with the grant writing.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to adopt a resolution placing a certain civil service employee on administrative leave without pay or benefits for a period of 30 days as the employee will be subject to a Section 75 civil service hearing?
So moved. Second.
Discussion?
Is that Linda? Okay. Well, just to comment that when the decision was made, we made the decision but never entered the information into the ordinance. So that we need to go on record with that, this information as is presented.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to recommend approval of the request for a leave of absence made by Diane Bonifant, phys ed teacher for the 2003-2004 school year, pending approval of the 2003-2004 state budget?
Move it. Second.
Discussion?
I think it's self-explanatory. Ms. Bonifant is the executive director for the Teacher Center. She has served in that capacity for several years. Once we know the disposition of the budget, assuming that there's the sum in there for operating the teacher centers for the fall, she would like to continue as the director at the Teacher Center.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to recommend approving the request from Andy Landry to operate a not-for-profit summer girls basketball program from June 30th to July 4th? Champlain Youth Commission will sponsor the program.
Move it. Second.
Discussion?
Just that what we're doing is allowing the use of our facilities during the period that's noted, June 30th to July 4th. And the town of Champlain provides a certificate of insurance. It's a program that is sponsored by the Youth Commission in the town of Champlain for this period for a large group of our students who participate in soccer. Excuse me, in basketball, girls basketball.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to recommend approval to place out for bid the following school buses in as-is condition, which are declared surplus? Buses number 89, 86, 84, 88, 92, and 94.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to recommend the following additions to the 2002-2003 substitute list? Non-certified Kevin Clancy, David Collins, Jeremy Hoy. Non-teaching custodial worker Sharon Parsons. School bus monitor Shirley Ann Roberts.
So moved. Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to recommend approval of payment to WPS Consulting Engineers for professional services on the middle high school heating coil replacement project? Construction management in the amount of $1,116. The construction phase is 90% complete.
I move it.
Second.
Discussion?
Just that as of this date, the project is virtually complete.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Some information items. At the June 9th meeting, there will be a presentation on the school report cards that were in our board packets this week. About 300 pages to read through in the next month there. I think I got through the first 20. I think the biggest thing I noticed was the grade 8 math scores came up quite considerably. The middle schools can be commended for that right up front. I can't wait to hear more about that when they give their report in June. Heidi Sample will be out on medical maternity leave from September 3rd to October 14th using sick leave. We have a comprehensive budget status report that was in our packets, dated 4/22/03. There were budget transfers dated April 21st. That's a revised copy of the April 4th request. I think, Chris, the biggest difference here I noticed was in the non-instructional salaries, non-instructional substitutes. Went from 2,400 to 10,000.
Yes.
I think that was the biggest difference. Did you have a reason for that?
We've been using a lot of, well, first of all, we've been using a lot of uncertified sub, meaning they're not certificated. And basically, all of this was kind of a catch-up. It's not surprising that they would be coming out of one of these areas. If you notice, the money is going from, in one case, from supervision code to 2110-161, and in another case, from 2110-112 to 2110-161. Just that we've used a lot of substitutes this year, and not every case can we get a certified substitute. Right. Okay. So it needs to be charged to those areas.
also in our packet budgetary transfers dated April 22nd. Warrant number 21 within our packet dated April 17th.
The warrant is a list of bills.
The bills that were paid by April 17th. Ricky Rabidou will be returning to his duties as a school bus driver effective September 1st, 2003. On the leave. Information on the student management software. Mr. DeCino, do you have anything on that?
We're in the process now of speaking to several companies regarding a student management software package. What historically we've done is the secondary buildings have been using a particular package. The elementary buildings have developed their own database. They're using a spreadsheet or an Access database. And as the requirements for data become more intense, comprehensive, there really is a need to look at a software package that in essence will tie all of the data together on a K-12 basis. So we've had 4 presentations where vendors have come in and presented to us. We're now in the phase of evaluating those presentations and their products. Specific emphasis is being placed on demographics, able to capture that kind of information for each student. A product that's able to assist us with comprehensive scheduling at the secondary level. There's a requirement that will be beginning soon, I believe it's July 1st, that will require at the secondary level period by period attendance maintenance. So we're looking for a product that can accommodate that. We want to make sure that we can capture all of our local and state assessment data so that we can better analyze and use that module for continuous improvement. We're looking to integrate or select a product that will also allow us to do online grading and reporting as well. A product that will allow us to capture our AIS data and all of what we're doing right now with our Access database. A module that will also include our health data so that we can maintain those records online for students as well as a discipline package. You've probably heard some things about the new state reporting for STEP at the secondary level, and of course ongoing with LEAP data. And we're hopeful to be able to select a product that's certainly cost-effective, something that we'd be able to grow with, and yet something that will enable us to export out of the program into the STEP database or the LEAP database, so that there's minimal rekeying and manual labor to move on. We're hopeful within the next week or so to make a final decision. We have some questions going back to the vendors right now, but we're optimistic that possibly early next week we can come to closure on this, and then it's going to be a fast-paced track to get this integrated within the district for use next year.
Thank you.
Does this mean that every staff and faculty or every classroom will have a computer in it to be inputting this data?
Well, ideally, that would be wonderful to have that resource in the classroom for that purpose and, of course, for other purposes as well. If based on economics, there's a need to phase this automation into place, we may be required to implement initially with a paper system and then grow into what you're speaking of. It really is dependent on the resources available, where we stand in terms of dismantling our labs, existing labs. But if that's possible, to place a computer on each teacher's desk, that would be an optimal.
And I just saw something this past week about IEP allowing for that to be electronic. Is there a role for that in the system as well?
I think everything.
That, you know, in terms of faculty having access to a student's IEP The thing I just saw this week from state ed said that it can be an electronic hour.
And we are doing it. It's a web-based model, web-based configuration where teachers do have access to the IEPs after the time.
So that would be independent of this state part.
Could it work the same way? Is that what you're saying?
It's not
I
within
can
this-
answer that. Yes, it is independent. We have Part 200 in the special ed office now, so although the special ed teachers don't have their own computers in the room, they go to the special ed office where they can access it from their home computers to put in data for the IEPs. But that is separate from what Mr. Regino's talking about.
Okay.
Although, once we get the system in place that he is talking about, we will be able to import data from Part 200 that we specifically need for stuff, so they will work together.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Next is a proposal to establish a district-wide administrative position and company director of special ed, chair of the committee on special ed, and coordinator of federal programs. Chris, do you have an update on that?
I do. Basically, tonight, all I want to do is share some information with you about it. What I can provide you this evening will be several documents. One dated May 11th, and it just says it's a proposal to the Board of Education, the establishment of a district-level position, Director of Special Education, Chair of the Committee on Special Education, and Coordinator of Federal Programs. And it gives a little history as to where we are currently with the number of administrators, takes into account the reduction of one position in the district. It addresses the number of grants amounting to $972,009 that are currently administered by two or more administrators in the district as a part of their role. And as far as the materials go, I'm also providing to you a copy of the assignments for administrators at this year, for 2002-2003. And in addition to that, a document that is a draft, but would indicate that the financial side of it, in a nutshell, it looks at the current configuration and how much that costs the district and where each of the administrators is coded in the budget. Are they coded to the administrative code entirely or in part? Are they partly coded to special education for the role that they play in special education? Often an administrator will be charged 10% of that code because they devote some of their time to special education. And it reflects any administrator who is charged to a federal program like Title I. Everybody have a copy? Is that, okay. And it addresses the benefits as well. Then it looks at a proposed change to this new configuration, and it shows you on the document that's entitled Administrative Restructuring Draft how much it would cost to move to the proposed position and any savings to the general fund. Now, Margot, do you want to say a few words about, you prepared to say a few words about the financial side of this?
I think I would just want to point out that off the top of my head, about 20% of one principal's salary and about 35% of a second principal's salary is charged to special ed, despite the fact that they spend considerably more of their time than that on those duties. With this organization, what it does not show is the fact that you are buying back that time. So the savings, in fact, to the district would be greater than you're seeing at the bottom rectangle on that page. Shows a savings of $91,000 and a net savings below that. In fact, that understates the savings, I believe, because you're buying back again that time. that's not reflected in the numbers.
Part of the way that we affect the change is by charging part of these positions off to federal grants. Okay? In one case, it would be about 40% of the position, and relative to the school psychologist, we're looking at the possibility of being able to charge up to $15,000 to a grant. Now, this is a draft, it's a work in progress, but I wanted to get this information to you as soon as I could, so you could take it and review it and see what questions you have and see if it's of any interest to the board.
Chris, what tenure area would this new position be?
It would have its own tenure area.
Would it be
there are some-
special
there are
ed
some-
or?
Well, it would have a tenure area that's, if we use that title, it would have that title. But it could be some other title that's modified, but it would be its own tenure area. The board would have the discretion, if it's so chose, to take an administrator and put them on leave for a year to that work on special assignment. Some of those details.
Sort of
Yeah.
like a teacher on other assignments?
Yes. So it's some of the details are yet to be worked out, but I think the basic material that you need is probably in your packet this evening. To take a look at it and see what questions you might have about such a position.
Okay, we'll put it on the agenda for our discussion item for the next meeting.
Thank you.
The 8th grade moving up ceremony is scheduled for Friday, June 20th. I think it's at 7 o'clock. Is that right, Mr. Mulligan?
That's correct.
Okay. High school graduation will be June 27th, Friday at 7:30. Budget presentation at Moores Elementary will be held on May 20th at 7 p.m., which is a week tomorrow. The budget presentation at the middle senior high school will be held on June 2nd, Monday at 7 p.m. The budget vote will be held on June 3rd, Tuesday, from 12 noon till 9 p.m. We have one more item here, a Community That Cares youth survey that was in our board packet.
Okay.
Crowley, do you have anything to?
Or that's Marie Dennis's project.
Yes.
Did you have anything you want to say about it? Marie's not here this evening, I don't think. What we have here, we have undertaken this survey in the past, and the materials that have been provided to you this evening outline what the survey covers, and also addresses the issue of an active permission form from parents, so that any student who participates in the survey, they will have brought a note home to their parents, and then we have a signature from the parents saying that it's okay. So what we'd like you to do is take the survey and review it, and let me know, if you would please, if you have any objection to us conducting this survey. The community, this is provided by the Communities That Care organization, and the survey is primarily an alcohol, tobacco, and other drug survey. It measures 19 risk factors associated with 5 problem behaviors in adolescence: substance abuse, delinquency, teen pregnancy, school dropout, and violence. The protective factors that buffer young people against exposure to risk, as well as the prevalence of behavioral outcomes such as substance abuse and delinquency. And this survey was developed by the Center for Disease Control. We have conducted such a survey a number of times in the past in the district. We're looking to board for any input, feedback, any direction for us with respect to this survey, whether you feel it's okay for us to, again, conduct the survey. It would be at the 6th, 8th, and 10th grades.
I'm
Chris?
sorry, I didn't hear what you were asking before. Mrs. Pettis, it's great to be briefly today about it. It is anonymous, so we were going to try to do it at the high school level, perhaps on a 5th period, because there's phys ed and labs, so she would do it every other day. It's not something that you can have the students have to and return and give back to them because it is anonymous, so she needs a 40-minute block of time to do it. So if the questions and everything are okay, and apparently they did it 2 years ago, then she has a date picked that she would do it 2 days in a row on fifth period in high school, so it would be disruptive, and she would alternate so that she wasn't pulling anyone from the lab.
I'd like to just, as a follow-up, correct myself. The survey was done at the 6th, 8th, and 10th grade levels, and this time, if we have authorization to do it, it'll be at the 8th, 10th, and 12th grade levels. Is that do it?
That's correct. The survey is connected with Yvonne Lott, Eastern Adirondack Healthcare provider, and it's a free survey. There's no expense to the district. She, I believe, has 5 to 7 schools in Clinton County area that are involved in doing this survey. The survey, the results of it, helped her with grant funding for her program. She is a very critical person in our community program called Parents Plus for Prevention. And it also serves as current data for our drug-free schools grant we have to file each year. The last time that this got brought to the board, there was some discussion whether to go with a passive or an active. It was decided at that time to go with an active parental permission request, and that's what we're asking for at this time as well.
I don't have any problem as long as it's voluntary and the school parents.
It would be helpful if you were comfortable doing so.
I'll make a motion to do this.
Participate in the survey and the community that cares for the survey. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion carried.
Thank you.
Discussion item, the first one is requirements for CV Tech. And this policy that was developed in our packet.
Now, is that, will be Mary or Dennis going to address the matter?
Probably Ms. Breffel, Mrs. Dennis, and myself tried to come up with some guidelines for students that are currently attending CV Tech and will return next year, and students who would like to go as new students or juniors. And what we're asking is that they just are on course, that they have their 9th and 10th grade English, social studies, math, and science, that they pass those and they have those credits so that they can go as full-fledged students, that they have not missed more than 18 days of school, say a sophomore. We're saying that, this is an expensive program. This is a program that we're providing for you, but you have to attend. If you missed 18 days of school the previous year, you probably will not be able to attend it. Unless there's you bring down extenuating circumstances. For those continuing at CV Tech, we've asked that they sign a contract now that they will not miss more than 18 days. What we're saying here is that 9 days per semester, so that we will review it in December, so that the student will know for second semester whether they can continue or not, because we don't have a student in March has missed 25 days of school. It's pretty hard to drop a student at that time. We don't have the courses to put that student in quarter credit courses. So we're saying we've taken the 18 days that we used last year, taken 18 days, saying that after first semester we'll review those, and if you've missed 9 days, then you need to be rescheduled here at the home school. And then we're saying that on completion of their junior year, that they have to be on course to graduate in order to attend CV Tech their senior year. I think what's happening, or we've seen a couple instances, where students are failing courses terribly. For instance, English 10 and English 11 this year, they're going to CV Tech. They cannot go to summer school with grade grades of 20 and 15, which means that they will not graduate next as a senior. They will need a fifth year. What we're saying is that we think that student needs to get back on course, stay here. They've gone to CD Tech this year. They need to stay here next year, get back on course with their Englishes and social studies. And then if they choose to go to CD Tech at fifth year, take their English 12 or whatever else they need, take it at their fifth year. So we were just looking for what your feedback or thoughts were. We're not trying to deny anyone going all together. We're just saying be on course with your subjects, and then you can go to CD Tech.
Are you finding some students who might not do well in their academics, but do reasonably well in the occupational
Very well.
course, and then would basically elect to drop out of school except for their participation in the BOCES program, which
They're saying, heck with the English and the social studies, I can't do it anyway, I'm not going to do it, but I want to go to CD Tech. And, we have established a set number that can go, and I think that's only reasonable. I think most schools have done that. And part of their education here is their English and their social studies.
Are you taking into account the English that's being offered at CD
Yes.
Tech and the certification that they've just received
Yes.
to be able to offer that instead of auto
Yes,
bodies?
they can get one credit in English, math, introduction to occupation, and it's your social science. Science, yeah.
One of the problems is some people, I think, are a little confused because those math, English 12, math 12, English 12, science 12, intro to Occ, they're incorporated into the curriculum. So when they go down to CD Tech and take drafting, they are not going part of the day and taking English or taking math. It's just incorporated. The state has said, okay, if a student is enrolled in the drafting program for 2 years, they can get up to 4 credits. Our concern is, and all the principals in the area have met and agreed that we could just use those in cases where there was a conflict where a student couldn't get the scheduling they needed, because we don't want to get into a situation where a student wasn't taking English 12 here, and then they would go down to CV Tech and just get credit for being in a drafting course that the other students were in and they weren't getting the credit. So in order with the new requirement for math and science to be responsible and make sure that the students going to CV Tech can meet those 3 credits now in science and math, it seemed minimally that if they at least didn't have the 2 credits of each of English, social, science, and math, that they probably wouldn't be able to graduate in time if we allow them to go down there. So we're just trying to make sure that they're on course and they realize how important their high school diploma is. And if they get those minimum credits before they go, there shouldn't be a situation. But in the case where they don't take their schoolwork serious, we'd like the ability to pull them back to make sure, if it looks when we evaluate that they can't graduate on time going to CV Tech because they're not being successful, then we can pull them back to the school so that we can still help them and get the schedule so they still can graduate on time.
Is one of our major concerns, though, that the students just don't go and that we're paying for them whether they're there or not?
We don't want them to just be going to CD Tech and not, they've tried that too, just get discouraged with the academic classes here and then seem to think that they can just go to CD Tech and we never allow that. Is that what you're asking, Sarah? Or is that what you're?
No.
Oh,
When you were saying about the attendance,
okay.
are you worried about the absences that we're paying for children who are not making use of?
That is a concern
Yes,
also,
absolutely.
yeah, because if the district's spending a significant amount of money, we'd like them to have some work ethic and the district's making a commitment, and we would like to have them make a commitment and to be there and get as much out of the program as they can, particularly because there's never enough room for everyone that would like to go. So we want to make sure if we're denying another student, people that are going are making maximum use of their time and getting as much out of it as they can. And if they're not going to do that, then we'd like to offer other students the opportunity to go in their place.
Is there a sense that attendance is worse for CV Tech students coming from school than our general
I
program?
think the attendance this year has improved because they signed, I think last year they had a contract for attendance, and then this year you put more teeth into it. And I believe that the attendance is overall better this year because they know they have to go as part of the program.
How did you come up with 18?
Help me get it. What is
18
That's
is-
for the regular policy.
Seems like a lot.
18
Yes.
for a full year, and 9 for a half year. It's consistent with the current policy and handle regarding course credit, denial of course credit. There's another committee, the attendance committee is currently looking at that in terms of the numbers. Other area schools use 20. I think 18's probably on the low end. It sounds high as the figure, but it's probably on the low end for some of them I've just recently been looking at.
That's almost a day every 2 weeks.
Like a month of school.
I actually thought it was high also, but when I talked to the other principals in the area, as far as I know, we have the most.
And the attendance has improved dramatically since we've been implementing that for CD Tech.
You know,
The catch here is the new graduation requirements. It's more like an add-on to what we've been doing in terms of them needing an extra year of science and math.
are we close to going to a fifth year of high school for OPED? Is that going to happen?
Or not just for OPED, I think for other schools also.
But this might this may be the first, it seems to me, the discussions that have been had before were particularly OPED, because they haven't had enough time with the curriculum as you're describing.
Well, if they're not filling courses, they should be able to graduate on time. When they get backed up on one course and 2 courses, or when they have a 20 in a class, which means no effort whatsoever, then they can't attend Sunday school. If they're on target, we can get them through on time.
So what is your timetable for asking the school board to, Arlene has a question.
Yes, I'd like to focus on the 18 days. What kind of absentee record is tolerated here?
It's 18, so it's
9 days a semester? Is that what you were saying, 9 days a semester? Short of having mononucleosis, 18 days out of 180 days of classes is 10%. And I think we really need to address the issue of, I don't know too many jobs that you can leave school, college or high school, and get where you can be absent 10% of the time. If the students are here and they're signing up to go to OCED, but they're not attending, that's a whole different issue than just not attending school. I'm cognizant of the fact that they have an extra pressure here because Northern Adirondack and Northeastern are the 2 schools that I think have to travel the furthest, except for Ticonderoga, to Mineville, to take the courses. But that's all scheduled and built in. So the 18 days concerns me in the sense that I'm hearing you say that we're not as high as some others, but it concerns me because I have a feeling that with all these new requirements, we may be looking at 4.5 years of high school instead of 4. And I'm concerned about the 18 days, but if I gathered right, there was a meeting of the minds over this issue at one time.
What happened with Mr. Rasco? He's got a committee together right now of faculty to decide what the policy on attendance is going to be in the high school for next year. But the 18 was set based on the policy that's in place right now, and we were trying to be consistent. And the issue we ran into this past year is we called all the students in and made them sign and have their parents sign before we would let them get on the bus to go to CV Tech. And the way it was set up for this year is as soon as you got over 18 absences, you were withdrawn from the program. Well, we ran into difficulty with that because after January, when Mrs. Marr would try to bring it back and schedule, there wasn't much that she could schedule them for unless we just brought them back and put them in the study hall for half a day. So we decided to just go with it for this year and try to change it. So if what you're talking about is lowering the 18, and that's what the board would like to do, then when Mr. Resco and the committee address that, they would need to lower that number, and then we could be consistent with the seating time. We're just trying to make the same policy for all students, whether they're here all day or they go down.
Well, I think that's fair, and I appreciate your comments, thank you. But I just needed to speak out on that because it's a real world in here when you get out this front door. And 10% of your absentees allowed in most places that you have jobs, 10% of your workforce for a year. Not too many places I know of anyway.
You raised an excellent point. After the committee has put forth its recommendations, if the board has a number they would like to see, I'm sure that we could work with that number. I wasn't here when they put the current attendance policy in place, and I think you're right, 10%. I think they were looking at a type of policy that was in and around 90% attendance. I think our current, the average all attendance, Mr. Grand Prix 94.
Between 94 and 95%.
Well, we're all facing budget constraints, and we're all tired of hearing about that, reading about it, and looking at it on TV and all the other things in the world. But when you're spending the kind of money for OCAD that you have to spend in the state, and at the end of the year, you're not sure if you're going to get the aid back, it's a critical issue. So I think the contract is a good idea. This is not kindergarten education. This is an education for commitment in the world of work, to be either a tradesman or woman, or to find out your goals if you want to go on to post-secondary, what fields you might want to travel into. And I just resent wasting the money if that's what the impression is given. And I think that's what we need to work on. Thank you.
I agree with you 100%, and as Dennis works with the attendance policy for this district, I would assume that we try to keep them together. Maybe it would be, a little bit less or the same, whatever, but we'll try to have them be the same.
Thank you.
Is it your request that at a future meeting that the board consider adopting this as our policy?
We'd just like to wait and find out what the attendance policy is going to be, and then change that a little bit so it's in agreement with
To
that.
be consistent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And our last item is an update and a review of the status of the state budget and the guidelines. Before we start that discussion, would anybody like to address the board in regards to budget, state budget guidelines, our proposed budget? Yes.
I'd just like to make a comment about the budget. We have adopted a proposed budget, right? And you were kind of looking at this budget to see if there's any possible changes to be made, seeing that the legislature is thinking about giving us more money. Well, as we all know, in the past week or so, we've received new assessments, and they're all up substantially, some more than others. A couple weeks ago, I also received a notice from my bank. My house payment went up $98 because of last year's escrow. It's just catching up this year. So that's $1,200 a year I have to pay, roughly $1,200 a year more I have to pay just on my house payment because of escrow. So that's not counting this year, whatever it goes up. So I guess my main comment is, seeing we have a proposed budget already accepted, even if the legislature wants to add money, I think any of that money that we receive should be put to lowering taxes. I can't see where we should be adding any money to a budget that's already proposed. And we all know times are tough, but I mean, if my escrow payment goes up another $98 next year, that's $2,400 in 2 years. That's a lot of money, and I'm working. You take somebody that's not working on a fixed income, I don't see how they're going to make it. And that's just one item. That's not counting your land taxes that are going to go up and other things. I think that comment needs to be made. I think a lot of people are going to make that comment when it comes to vote on the budget. And I think that's one statement that really had to be made. I have one question about the last meeting that you had. You made some comment about what the increase in assessment value was? What was that number you said?
We use 5 million.
You used 5 million.
We use $5 million for budget building purposes. The actual number is now in at 23.9 million. Okay?
I got 24, but it's,
23.9.
yeah, okay, that's,
Well, we're,
but that can change some. And I understand there's one big grievance in that could really change that a lot, but that one probably won't be into this budget, I don't think, but it's hard to say. I was just curious, I thought you had said 5 million, but I wasn't sure.
we use that for developing the budget because we really didn't know at the time. You know, we started building the budget in November and December, and so we assumed we were going to get an increase, but we didn't know how much of an increase. And we always keep in mind grievance day and that once assessments come out, because you know when individuals, taxpayers go and see their assessors, sometimes it'll be modified a little bit based on information given to the assessor by the taxpayer. And by the way, that's a process that we're not a part of. That's handled by the assessors. But,
Right, I understand.
Yeah.
So now that you know what's in, what is the number that you're using? Or are you still using the 5 million?
No, we're going to be chatting about that tonight. We're going to be discussing that tonight and showing the school board several scenarios to get direction from the school board as to about what level we think we would go with, so that we can estimate, when this process comes to a conclusion, we can estimate the approximate increase in taxes over the current year.
We know it's probably not going to be 23.9 million.
Right, I understand that. I mean,
We have
probably
those
talking more
scenarios
like
here.
probably 20 million. A lot of it depends on that grievance, if that happens this year. I mean, that could be a long drawn out thing too.
So it could be retroactive too sometimes.
Yeah.
You have to pay the money back,
But-
and that's the worst case.
Yeah, that's worst case, and that's only if it happens next year and it comes back to affect this budget, then we'll pay for it in the next budget. It won't affect this budget. You were talking about grants earlier, about that position. You've got 972,000 in grants is what you have currently.
On an annual basis, yes.
So that figures into the budget too, right?
No, that's completely separate and apart from the general fund budget. It's administered, if we have a $20 million budget, 972,000 is beyond that. It's administered separately from the general fund budget. Now, some positions might be charged to a grant for 10% of the position's time, if you will. Basically, what we try to do is to charge the various codes in the budget, in the general fund budget, the school budget, and to the grant, the amount of time an individual, for example, devotes to that work. If they did 10% of their time out of the grant, they'd be charged to the grant 10% of the time.
So that money that you charge to the grant goes back to the budget,
Would not be in the budget,
would not be in the budget.
correct. So maybe it could be something like this, just to give you an
But
example.
if you're, like you're using this position here, if you got a salary of 60,000, 10% of that, which is 6,000,
Mhm.
that would be charged to the grant.
Right, so that only would be 50,000, you say 10,000?
Be
50,000 general fund, 10,000 grant. That's the theory.
Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, I said 6,000, but it'd be 50.
Well, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And this
okay.
is true of benefits as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else, any questions, comments? Yes, no?
Yes, Dr. Abrams, just knowing that the proposal from the legislature is very, very high, sounds very good, it's unlikely to actually occur. We do know that somewhere between the budget, governor's proposal and the legislature proposal, there will be something. Is the board willing to revisit and consider putting $7,500 in for a school play, which is a very modest amount, which would benefit 60 to 100 students next year? And I have had several students asking about this and trying to figure out where money might come from.
Right now, we haven't considered anything going back in or going back out. We really haven't gotten to that point. We really feel quite uncomfortable not having some kind of a firm grasp and a firm figure. The numbers that we've been using, that we see in front of us, that we were given here on the state aid proposals, don't really reflect the actual, the governor's proposal doesn't really reflect the actual expenses that we reported last year. That difference is to the tune of about $450,000. So if you reduce that 800,000 by 450, that leaves you with $350,000 if everything goes through, and a lot of that is categorical in certain areas. So we really don't, I think, I speak for everybody, I don't want to speak for anybody, but we feel uncomfortable doing anything at the present time, because we're just, what direction is going to happen? The governor has until Wednesday to veto the budget. And then the legislature has, I don't know how many days they have to override the veto, I think it's 10 calendar days to override the veto. And all are part of that. Yes, Jim?
What's the last date that you, the board, has to have the budget?
Well, that's really hard to figure out.
Well,
We try to go as long as we can. They put out theirs for the last possible minute. We're talking the 24th. They have it until the 24th, which I think is a Saturday, to veto the budget, or to override his veto.
the legislature.
I mean, your budget, I'm talking before budget.
Right here. Yeah, I think we have to go by the 20th, if I'm not mistaken.
Our first informational meeting is the 20th of May, then another 2nd of June, vote on the 3rd. So we really need to finalize our plans, in my view, actually this evening, because I suppose if something happened tomorrow, I suppose we could convene. But for practical purposes, we really need to draw this to a conclusion, because we have to have materials ready for the voters to consider at the informational meetings. We have two, where some districts have one, because we have two voting districts. So we have two informational sessions, and generally 7 days before, we need to have those materials ready for the voters. Now, this is an unusual year, so we probably won't be able to meet that, but generally, we need a little time to take the budget materials that we've assembled and get those to the printers, turn around and have them available for our informational meetings, which are, for us, it will be next Tuesday, the 20th.
I'm just wondering if she's gotten to Wednesday to veto it, why is a big push then to have the budget tonight then? Let's see what the governor is going to do, if he's going to veto it or not. He said Wednesday. Today's Monday.
He has to go Wednesday. He has to go Wednesday at midnight to veto the budget or parts of the budget, to line item veto it.
So you said, why, I just wondered, why go and press for a vote tonight? I say, let's wait till see what the governor's going to do.
There really is no, we're not voting on another, but right now we have a budget in place. We can decide to amend that budget and to increase or decrease that amount. And that's what we're here to discuss tonight, what we're going to do. And we don't really know what we're going to do. I think we're in a dilemma as much as anybody else is in a dilemma. I don't mean to sound wishy-washy, but 17 years I've been doing this, I've never had a year like this. It's the most uncomfortable that I've ever felt going this close to a budget vote.
Are you running it, huh?
Yes, he is.
So, anybody?
I think, the first thing we need to do is see what the governor's going to do on Wednesday, and it's certainly within our purview to have an emergency. I guess we have to publish it, but we could get together pending what the governor does. The problem, of course, is the governor making a decision. Of course, he can choose not to veto, and then we know. But if he chooses to veto, then we have another delayed decision in terms of the ability of the legislature to override that veto. But some of my colleagues, we're basically in a wait and see mode. We do, as Mike said, we do have a budget. We voted a budget, and it's just a matter of if we choose to amend that in the in the very near future, given the time.
I think we're required to give 24 hours notice before we have a meeting.
Yes.
So the earliest we could have a meeting would probably be Friday sometime, be Friday night or Saturday. No law against having a meeting on a Saturday. And that's the earliest we could do anything would be on Friday. If we deem that we had to have another meeting. Now, I'd like to go through, Chris, maybe get some of these tax. Remember we were using to come up with the tax rate and the plans we have?
Yes,
Sure.
Before we get too far afield into the nitty-gritty here, I really think that, and hope not being too presumptuous to speak on behalf of the board, to thank those of you who took the time to get in touch with your legislators either by email or whatever, to let them know what a situation this had created. And for those of you that did take the time to do it, it's appreciated, and you're not doing it for us, and hopefully you're not doing it for yourself. You're really doing it for the students in this community that will go out and pay your Social Security in a few years. Take my word for it. So on behalf of all of us, we do know that a lot of you let your voices be heard, so thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
It created other problems, but thank you.
Yes, Kim? Can't hear you.
Okay, say that you guys do get the money, same as you had last year, or an increase, is Champlain still going to get this, or would you guys even think of keeping it open? You had told us you would if we got the funds, not in the funds. I just wanted to.
Based on the numbers that we have, like I said earlier to start this, the numbers that the governor's proposal had don't reflect the numbers that we filed in our report of November 25th of '02. The difference is the tune of $460,000.
Well, we were at a difference of, I mean.
Now the difference is 800, the 801. You take the 460 away, you're left with 340,000. That's the most, and some of that is categorical. So our number, like the crystal ball that we used, says that we may get maybe 150 if everything goes through to a $200,000. I don't know how, and that's just pure guesstimate.
No, that's over
really.
last year's, right?
No, that's
That's
over what what our current budget is.
Okay, and how did we have the money last year to have Champlain? So they don't, you told us to write representatives, and you were only, I mean, how did the crisis happen now?
We were losing $600,000 roughly originally. In the first proposal that came out with the governor's proposal, we were losing $600,000. And then when the legislature came up with their proposal, we were supposedly gaining $800,000, if you want to call it that way. But that's $800,000 over the governor's, not over the current budget. So that was a net increase over this year's budget of $200,000. But based on the figures that we have and that difference of $460,000, we're still in the hole with that $200,000 plus about $250,000 less than last year, which was the reason for some of those cuts.
But what about the new administrative thing that you want to add?
That's
Somebody already performs that, right?
That's strictly a proposal right now. Right now, that's being split amongst the administrators in the district, but we had cut administrative position. That's right.
And the only question I have is, like I said, we started meetings in January or whatever. You told us then that we'd be able to keep the school.
And the cost to
open.
keep Champlain open is approximately $400,000 to $450,000. Right now, we're at a downfall of $250,000. So I don't see how it's possible right now to do that.
But that's what I'm saying, you should have said that when the meeting started.
We didn't know,
rather than-
we didn't know how much money we were going to get at that time.
There's another part of this that we really haven't talked about tonight, and I'll just touch on a couple of areas. Our special ed costs are increasing over this year's cost about $500,000 for next year. Okay, that drives up the budget side, and also health insurance is up, I think, about $400,000. That's almost $1 million in just those two items. So, with the cut in aid, even if we do get a little new aid, we still have a tremendous increase in expense. So we started out with almost a 9% increase in the budget. Now we're down to about 5%. So we've had to cut a lot of things out of that budget to get it down to something more reasonable. Keeping in mind what Mr. LaValle has alluded to tonight with higher assessments and so forth. So, you know, that it all goes into the development of the budget, coming up with a proposal that we can live with for next year. It's been very difficult. And just one other point. When you see in the paper a governor's proposal, for example, they're using a number that they have put together down in Albany, and then there's our real number. When we complete our state reports in the summer, we add up our expenses in these various categories, like special education, transportation, and so on, and then we apply for aid. So a lot of this is estimated until the books are closed at the end of June, until we complete the state reports during the summertime. And we actually got our real number somewhere around November 25th. So prior to that, it's all an estimate. And for us who build the budget, we want to be very careful that we don't overestimate the revenue for the ensuing year, for the next year. We try to analyze that very closely. So often the numbers that you get out of the governor's office or even from the legislature, they don't necessarily reflect exactly what's on our out reports. There can be quite a bit of difference in those. The growth aid that they're proposing at $100,000, $100,858. Our estimate, looked at that today, we think it's in the somewhere in the $80,000 range, just to give you an idea. Okay, so we have to temper the numbers that they give us with what we think are the actual numbers we're going to be receiving in aid for a given year. I'll just share that thought.
Hey, yes, Larry.
Yeah. I just have a couple of things to say. Larry Vail. First of all, I tend to agree with Mr. DeGrandpré in respect that we have to be cautious because overriding a veto to delay a budget vote is a lot easier to override than appropriations bill. I think we maybe counting our chickens before they hatch on that one because that's a very difficult bill to override. And from what I have read, that New York State Assembly and the governor will be carefully watched by other states because essentially it would marginalize the governor if the Assembly and the Senate overrode a budget bill. So I think it is prudent to be cautious. And I would just also like to address a statement by Mrs. Penfield on behalf of the teachers that have shown up and as a citizen of this community. I'd like to thank the board for being very democratic in this process and allowing us to speak our mind and also allowing us to say some pretty pointed remarks. And I think that only benefits us all. So, as we appreciate the board, we appreciate what you have allowed us to do.
Thank you. We tried to keep the process as open as we possibly could. Right back since February, we wanted an open discussion, and at times it got heated. At times, nobody took anything personal. I don't think anybody on the board took anything personal as to what was going on. It's just part of the frustration that we're all sharing in getting through this process. And we will get through it, and it still may be painful again.
So, sure.
I'll give a quick comment. Sorry. I'm a little scared here when you start talking about that $24 million as being found money here on the assessment. That's people's values. Some people haven't put a nail in their house and their taxes. I talked to a guy today from Rouse's Point. His assessment went up 41%. So without raising your tax rate a penny, his tax rate's going to go up 41% if he's not. So it's not found money. It's not new construction. It's the same people.
Some of it's new construction.
But very small
We
percentage of
estimated
it.
the $5 million to be new construction because we did that. We used that $5 million. We were going on new construction or additions or repairs or renovations. That's where we came up with the $5 million estimate. We didn't realize back when we did that there were going to be a total reassessment.
Mike, could I speak to that?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes, Robin.
Along with what Mr. Castine's commented on, we're very cognizant of that. Thanks for bringing it forward. You should be in front of the camera when you speak, though. There's something that I really paid attention to a lot in the last several years, and I really just want to share it with the audience, maybe in a selfish way, but my intent is to be unselfish about it. I really would like you to go to your neighborhoods and try and think back 5, 10, and for those of us that dye our hair, maybe 15, 20 years, and take a given number of houses in your community and see how many children are there compared to 5, 10, or 15 years ago. In my community, next to me, were 3 houses with 19 children. There were 7 boys in one house, 7 girls in the house across the street, and 5 in the one next to it. Where I live, I have to go almost maybe a mile and a half before I find 2 children in the opposite direction. And the only reason I'm saying that is because I'm getting a feedback in the community more and more and more, and I think it's going to extrapolate throughout the country and throughout the state, and you will be here, whereas I probably will be not. To be cognizant of the fact that more and more I'm hearing people say, I have no children in school, and I'm paying these taxes for whatever rate, either outrageous or unfair, depending on whom you're listening to, or they say, I've had my children in school. So I really want to point that out, because the whole basis of it is going to affect how you fund schools here in the future. And I also like to remind everyone here who's been very faithful to contribute to this process, and when you have a budget workshop, it is a work in progress. Nobody gives any guarantees in the beginning, and hopefully we get the answers in the end. But I really want the communities to be cognizant of that so that you can think about it with your legislators, because as you have a situation where you have less and less children in your community that come from a lot of buildings, you're going to have bigger issues to deal with. We've already been warned that this year is the first of 5 really hard years for schools. So I just want to share that with you, because I've gone up and down my neighborhood in Rouse's Point. I've done the same thing in Champlain, and where I know people and I've known them forever, their children are gone, they live alone, or they don't have children. So I want you to see that the people that are really paying the taxes now are much more focused on their bills because they have no children in school, and that's going to bite us, I think. So we need to really think about that in the future. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I was going to take just a couple of minutes to go over with the board some estimated tax sheets. And we've run several scenarios. I'm going to maybe address 3. See what your thoughts are on these. 1, increase in assessments as given to us by the real property office show an increase of $23,941,014 over the current year. Now, if the $23,941,014 were factored into an estimated tax rate for next year, that would reduce, if it was all used to reduce taxes, it would result in about a 4.72% increase in taxes over the current year. Now we know it's grievance day, we have the tax certiorieries looming. Now if we use this sum of 16 million, then the result is about a 7.07% increase over the current year if you use 16 million in assessments. And if you use 10,941,014, just for reference purposes, that would result in about an 8.6% increase in taxes. Now keep in mind, there are other factors that enter into determining what a tax rate might be for a given year, to include the fund balance, and to include anything that might, any adjustments on grievance day. When the date comes, all of the assessments that that are available are used in preparing a recommendation to the board as to what the levy for the year is. And of course, the other factor that we alluded to tonight is state aid. How much state aid are we going to get in a given year that might help reduce any increase in taxes, pay for the programs and services that we offer the children here?
Excuse me, Mr. Greenberg, what was the second increase percentage? 7 what?
707.
707.
Okay, based on 16 million.
And that's probably the one we're using as our best guesstimate. We picked that one in the middle to give the example. So that's what's going to happen. The worst case scenario would be the 10 million. That's taking the tax area into account there. That should give you 8.6%. So right now we're at 12, 12 and a half, so we think we can get it down maybe to 7, just with the money being used to reduce taxes.
But I point out, you're still not, the amount raised by local taxes is not going down when you use those figures. You're just using our tax rate is gonna go down. But if your assessment went up, you're still paying the higher tax. So I know, so you can't use it like it's, our taxes are only gonna go up 7%. They're not. They're actually going up the assessment of your house plus the 7% or whatever.
And if I could add, the impact of the limitation on the STAR program could have an impact. Again, we're not sure what the legislature has in mind for the coming year, so that could have a bearing on it as well,
The negative one.
assuming that it's capped or limited. Yeah. It does have the overall effect of distributing the taxes more broadly when they do a countywide revaluation, and they've done all the towns in the district. It has a tendency to redistribute, and it does generally have a tendency of pushing down the tax rate, which it will help, so long as that we don't spend all of the difference.
So it pushes down the rate, but it doesn't push down the taxes. If your assessment went up 10%, right away you're paying an extra 10%.
On the whatever the newly established tax rate is.
Tax rate is, right.
And hopefully that tax rate might be a little lower than what you would otherwise have had. So that will help mitigate a little bit, perhaps, depending on how much your assessment is up.
Yes, sorry.
You were talking about the STAR, Mr. Greenberg, and that program right now is capped at 30,000, right?
That's correct.
And they haven't talked
That's for
about
65, it's for 65, it was for 50.
Right,
50,000.
30,000 for under 60.
65, Sheila? Margo?
60.
65 years of age for
Because I get it, and I say
50,000.
And it's income-based.
Right. Have they talked about changing that with the new proposals? They haven't mentioned that at all. So.
The little I've seen relative to it is a capping at the 30,000 basically.
Sorry, yes.
So if you have an assessment less than 30,000, you don't pay any taxes, is that, even if you have kids in school, like you
Yes.
live in a trailer or something that's not worth 30,000, you don't
If you
pay?
signed up for the STAR program, yes, that's right, you would. Some older people that have older houses, they're paying $2, $3 in taxes. I've heard cases of that out there last year. Anybody have anything else on the board? Any other questions, comments? Our next move is to anticipate what's going to happen on Wednesday. When the governor, what he does, and then we'll have to act accordingly, and there could possibly be a special meeting on Friday. Okay, is there a motion to go into executive session to discuss 4 personnel, 1 negotiation, and 1 legal item?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.